Hey, welcome back to the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. And I say welcome back because today is part 2. Now, why are we doing what we're doing? It's because our goal is to add value to you, podcast listener, podcast leader, so you'll multiply value to others. As I said, today's episode is about continuing our 2-part process, our 2-part series on applying questions that will allow us to think through before starting something new, a new venture, a new project. Anything new in your organization or leadership needs you to intentionally think through it. That's why John's lesson today is so important. My co-host Tracy Morrow and I will be back to talk after John's teaching on how you can apply this to your life, to your leadership, to this new product or process. If you'd like to watch this episode on YouTube or download the free bonus resource, you can visit maxwellpodcast.com/giveyourbest. Okay, I hope you've listened to part 1 because here is part 2 and John Maxwell.
Question number 7, do you embrace failure as a friend? I've heard Tom Peters say this, you have probably too, or you've read it from him. He's the one that really kind of made it famous. Tom Peters said, test fast, fail fast, adjust fast. Boy, that's the key. Test fast. You think something will work, go out and try it. Get out there quickly, try it. Fail fast. You go out there and try, oops, didn't work. Adjust fast. That's how you build a new venture. It isn't a series of successes. It is a series of failures that you learn quickly from and adjusted and re-entered and went back in to do it again. That's where the success comes from. In my book, Failing Forward, I have a thesis. And the thesis of the book is the difference between average people and those who achieve is their perception of and response to failure. How I see failure going in, how I respond to failure coming out, is absolutely essential to my success. Question number 8. Are you creative in problem solving? Because when you do a new venture, you have all kinds of problems. New ventures attract problems. They just do. I mean, they're like, summer heat and mosquitoes. It just works. It takes a lot of creativity to deal with reality. Creativity is the joy of not knowing it all. The joy of knowing it all refers to the realization that we seldom, if ever, have all the answers. We always have the ability to generate more solutions to just about any problem. Being creative is being able to see or imagine a great deal of opportunity to life's problems. Creativity is having many options. In 1979, I wrote this. And I'm kind of proud of it. It's held the test of time. The letter P stands for the fact that problems are predictors. Nothing predicts your future more than problems because problems move you. Problems don't let you stay the same. They move you. Nothing is more predictive of what you're going to be but the problems that you have. They're reminders. There are reminders that life is not easy, that there is a lot of stress, and that that's part of life. There are opportunities. Every problem has within it the seed of opportunity. Almost every good thing you and I have was birthed out of problems. Every time you take medicine, because somebody got sick. Somebody said, got to figure out a way to not get sick. So opportunities are the seedbed of problems. Letter B is their blessings. I have learned more and grown more in my life because of my problems than I have because of my success. Letter L, there are lessons. They have something to teach us. They never leave us the same. So the question is not, do you have the problem? The question is, what did you learn? Letter E, the problems are everywhere. Let me describe immature thinking. Immature thinking is thinking no one else has problems but you. That's immature thinking. Their problems are everywhere. They're messages. They're signals to us. They're just like the dashboard of our car. They're sending signals to us of things that we need to adjust, and that letter S is they're solvable. Question number 9, are you competitive? John Wooden said, you are in the presence of a true competitor when you observe that he or she is indeed getting the most joy out of the most difficult circumstances. The real competitors love a tough situation. That's when they focus better and function better. At moments of maximum pressure, they want the ball. Question number 10, can you handle criticism well? Einstein said, great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. And if you're going to start something, you're going to be criticized. The rule of 5% is very simple. No matter what you do, 5% of the people will not be happy. So you can't make them happy. Don't try to make them happy. They're just not going to be happy. Okay. So how do you handle criticism? Number one, ask yourself what kind of criticism it is. There's concerned criticism, which comes from someone who cares. Value that. There's constructive criticism that's given to help you improve. Learn from that. There's casual criticism. It's uncaring. It's often unfounded. Ignore it. And then there's cruel criticism. It's unfair and it's meant to hurt. Congratulations, you're successful. Those are the 4 levels of criticism. Number 2, assume people are trying to help you. That's a great way to handle criticism. Just assume that they're trying to make you better. Number 3, be open-minded. And number 4, stay on the high road. Always take the high road. Question number 11, are you optimistic? An optimist is a person who makes the best of it when he gets the worst of it. And in starting a new venture, you got to have that optimism. It's the only thing that keeps you bouncing back. In your notes, people are 5 times more likely to be optimistic about another person's goals if they think that person is optimistic themselves. Last question, question number 12. Are you decisive? Hey, just make a decision.
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified Team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Tracy, so good to have you back for part 2. I thought about John F. Kennedy's quote that says, "Those who dare to fail miserably can achieve greatly." And I think that's really kind of a part of, do you have what it takes? These questions that John has been given us. And this week, you just heard questions 7 through 12. And I believe John is really challenging us to be the best we can be, to assess what we bring to the table and perfect it and improve it. And so, Tracy, I'm always glad to dig into these podcasts and listen to John and apply it. But today's going to be a great continued to part 1.
I completely agree. But I think if we want to get people to start thinking of failure from a different perspective, we need to stop using words like fail miserably. Like, I think we need to use words like fail spectacularly. Let's give a positive word, President Kennedy.
Hey, here's the way we'll say it in Tracy Morrow style. Fail with flair. Fail with flair.
That's right.
That's exactly right. Just make it big.
With confetti. That's right.
That's right.
So the first question for this week, question number 7, is do you embrace failure as a friend rather than a miserable companion, someone that almost makes you feel like you blew it and you're the worst and you should just give up now? And so I think most of us do view failure as like, maybe you should think about giving up and finding something else to do. So how, Mark, in your opinion, do we help our friends on the podcast, maybe ourselves in a little small way? I'm sure that we could even analyze ourselves because we all still struggle with this. How do we help ourselves, our friends, get into the arena and not fearing failure, especially when it involves, people and jobs and that voice in our head? How do we get away from that and moving towards viewing it as our friend?
Yeah, you touched a little bit on it. And by the way, next week, I'm not even promoting next week, but I got to make this point to get to the next one. Next week, we start on the podcast a 4-week series where John is going to be talking about his new book, High Road Leadership. And I promise you, you're going to love the next 4 weeks. John's live. He's going to be live in the studio with me. You're going to love it. The reason I say that, Tracy, is to answer your question, though. Be ready. Be here next week. John's live. It's going to be awesome. But the reason I say that is because the next book that John talks about is going to be the book he's already written that's after this one. And it's called How to Get a Return on Failure. And Tracy, you talked about this. John's talked about it in today's lesson. I think it's changing our perspective on failure. For failure to become your friend, you've got to quit determining your value based on the failure. Oh, I failed. I'm not any good. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, I wish I could not do failure. Because chances are, if you're not failing, you're not trying something big enough that would warrant you failing. And so I think changing the perspective to say, hey, I want to do something so big that failure the first time is not possible, it's probable. And I want to do something so big that if it is achieved, God will get the credit for it. It's just bigger than me. And oftentimes, we do everything we can to stay away from failure and therefore limit what we accomplish. We do too much identifying ourselves and our value based on the success or the failure of something that we don't have a proper perspective of ourselves. And I think that comes back to what you said, viewing failure as a friend. When the idea of how to get a return on failure, John makes every idea a great one, but it was an idea I had. I was being interviewed by a lady that wrote a book called The Dirty Little F Word. Now, I know where all you guys' mind went. I know I'm watching Tracy. She's dying laughing. I know what y'all thought. But the word that she was talking about was failure. We make failure the dirty little F word, and we try to stay away from it. And when I was interviewing with Amy, and we were talking about her book, and she kind of put me in a section of the book, I told Amy, I said, Amy, the problem with most people, most leaders, is they want to get a return on time. Of course, we know what a return on investment is, an ROI, but most people don't have an ROF mindset. They go into something and saying, if I fail, the most valuable thing I'm going to get is the lesson from the failure. They don't look at failure as an attempt to get a return back to become better. They look at failure to determine whether something was successful or not. Success is not whether you failed. Success is whether you learned something that will make you better on the next thing that you try. And so I really think it's a mindset, Tracy, and this idea of do we have what it takes? If you can't see failure as your friend, you're never going to accomplish your full potential, because on the journey to your full potential, failure is absolutely going to happen.
Yeah, and yet why is it so scary? I think from the time we're a little kid in school, when we don't want to raise our hand and give the answer and have it be wrong, very young, we are taught that it's scary to try in the chance that it's wrong, and then we're going to look foolish or feel foolish. And that carries with us really into adulthood. And if we can learn to, what's that old saying that success is not the opposite of failure. Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is a part of success. Yeah. And I love that you expanded on that. Okay, question number 8 He says, are you creative in problem solving? So I'm curious to ask you, Mark, in your hiring process, how important is creative problem solving when you are hiring a team member? And how do you even find that out when you are bringing a team member on?
Yeah, so I love when I get to talk about problem solving because it reminds me of one of the most incredible, accomplished female leaders in my time. Remember, my mom was a leader before her time, and the world just couldn't understand the significance of what my mom could bring to the table because of her gender. And that's my mom. That's one generation away. She's 95 now, but she was absolutely a leader before her time. But make no mistake, she was the leader of our family. You go to a leader in our time that was accomplished, and it's our good friend Carly Fiorina, who started as a receptionist at Hewlett-Packard and became the CEO of the largest, first female of that large of a company as the CEO. Incredible. Here's how she defines leadership. Carly says, leadership is problem solving, nothing more, nothing less. John always says leadership is influence, but Carly says, hey, your ability to solve problems and make problems opportunity is absolutely your doorway to the next leadership assignment. When you can solve a problem, trust me, hang out. You've just proved yourself valuable to an organization, to a team. I think Carly's onto something. And so when you ask the question, how do we hire? How do we look for people? I ask people all the time, hey, how do you respond to problems? When I'm interviewing them, how do you respond to problems? When you're given a problem, when you created a problem, and when you solved a problem, give me your posture, give me how you work. And I let them go through it and tell me, oh, I love problems, I'll get problems, oh my, I don't want problems, oh my, I never want to be a problem. I let them give me all their perspective on problems, and then I say, hey, tell me the last time you solved a problem and the results from that. Because see, a problem solved is not just making something go away. A problem solved should lead to production or opportunity in the future. We don't eliminate problems to get rid of nuances or nuisances. We solve problems so that we can be ready and clear the board for opportunity and advancement. That's the way a leader looks at a problem. A problem eradicated is an opportunity gained. And so I love this. You know, what I would tell you on problem solving for me, and those of you that have been a part of the podcast for some time, you've probably heard me say this. The way that I became successful with John is in being his CEO, I would identify problems. And I would say, I think this is a problem. This is a problem worth raising to the flagpole and saying, hey, John, help me. And I would say, hey, I think this is a problem. Then I would go into solving mode. What are solutions that are option mode, really? What are the options in solving this problem? And then I would go with a recommendation. So every time I would come to John and say, John, I think this is the problem. I've identified this as a problem. And 95% of the time, especially in most recent years, John would say, yeah, I think that's a problem. But I never brought a problem without an option. And I never brought an option without a recommendation. So just those of you that are really in second chair, third chair, fifth chair, you're not the senior leader. You're going to make yourself valuable at getting good at identifying problems. You're going to become good at giving options to problems, and you're going to become great at solving and recommending what option there is. And so I always came with three options. John, here's the problem. Do you agree this is a problem? Well, here's three options, and here's my recommendation, and this is why it's my recommendation. And that formula not only helped me get advancement in the area of leadership and responsibility, it has kept me useful and viable to the lifeblood of John, but to the lifeblood of this organization.
I love that. I love how he said, in every problem is the seed of opportunity. And that's what you see in it. And so as a leader, John's saying, we want to see that in not just the problem, the negative side of it, but the opportunity for something even better to come as a result of that problem, which kind of feeds into question number 11, which are you optimistic? It's not just seeing the negative side of a problem, but the optimism in that situation. I'll come back to number 9 and 10, but switching to number 11 because optimism feeds into that. Do you think optimism is something that can be learned, or is that something that is just built into a person?
I do believe that optimism is built into a person. I think that there's DNA, there's natural environments in our early childhood and in our early development that makes people either naturally or learned at an early stage to be more optimistic. I absolutely believe that. I believe there's some people that surround a lot of optimism and they go, oh my goodness, this is driving me crazy. I'm going to be more of a realistic individual. Right. So I think there are work environments, there are cultures that are better at optimism, and they oversubscribe to optimism, so it becomes a liability to that organization. But I will tell you this, we did a podcast recently, and I was talking about the difference between being fearful and hopeful, and I was being my little cheesy Southern self, Tracy, that we laugh at, and I was going, are you hopeful, you're full of hope, fearful, are you full of fear? A leader should never be full of fear. If you only have capacity for fear, then you can't do what every leader has to do when leading a team, and that is bring hope. You can be realistic. In other words, you can have fear, but you can't be full of fear. Because in every leader, there has to be at least a sliver of hope. There has to be at least a little bit. So if you're up to your full capacity on fear, you can't lead, because people don't want to follow fear. They want to follow hope. And so back to your question on optimism, I think we have to have, even in difficult times, we have to have a ray of optimism, a ray of hope in our leadership.
That's right. And I think if you're somebody who's filled with fear, I think everyone has hope in them. And if you are full of fear, then there's another issue that probably just needs to be dealt with in what you're feeding. John always says, starve your fear and feed your hope and your faith. Yep. Okay, so jumping back to the order of these questions, are you competitive? I think that kind of goes without saying. When you're building something, of course, you've got that fighter in you. So I think we'll jump to question 10, which I love, because I think everyone, it's something that we need to address, and John takes the time to address it. Can you handle criticism well? So I think in this world where there is so much, we've even opened ourselves up even on social media, where people, bots and people who you don't even know can weigh in and criticize you. But how have you seen John handle casual and cruel criticism? And then how has that affected how you have learned as a leader to handle criticism, Mark?
Yeah, what my biggest takeaway from this, Tracy, was, can you handle criticism well? Often we call handling criticism well, meaning we can take it, give it to me. But John teaches us that there's some criticism that you need to reject, you need to ignore. And that's what we're talking about today. And there's ways to talk about, hey, how do you make the most of criticism? How do you make criticism your friend? And that's all good. I like all that. But what I want to spend my time and our time on, Tracy, is talking about handling it well. And I think John gave us an incredible framework that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But let me say this. I think the reason John Maxwell handles criticism well, not does he handle criticism. That's a good question. Can you handle criticism? ? It's good. That's good. You need to answer that question. But today, that's not what we're doing. Can you handle it well? Is what we're talking about. I think that John absolutely handles criticism better than anybody I've ever met. Why? Because he never gets it? No, he gets it quite often. He gets it from friends. He has friendly fire quite often. I can remember when John started a coaching company and people didn't understand. Not only do they not understand, he's very successful, they didn't understand how it could be a coaching company. It wasn't substantive enough. They didn't like the faculty. They didn't like how it was presented. John was a subject of incredible criticism. I was here even before that when John gave up his place of his ministry as a pastor and went to the business community. And 70% of the calls I handled as a customer service rep was people friendly fire. It's people criticizing him for doing that. And I'm watching John right now making some decisions and befriending people, even as we speak. I mean, right now at the recording of the podcast, and people going, why'd you speak on that stage? Why'd you do that? And I'm watching John handle that well. So that's what I want to key on. He knows when to value it, when to learn from it, when to ignore it, and when to reject it. And that's what John's talking about. Concerned criticism comes from someone who cares. Value that. Tracy, you and I, we won't take time today. We don't even have enough time, but you and I, you gave me some incredible critique 2 phone conversations ago. We've had 2. I mean, it was incredible. It was not easy. It was one of the hardest conversations you've ever had with me. And by the way, it wasn't anything nasty, guys. It was just Tracy and I trying to work through something. You know why you gave me that? Because you care as much as you care for what we do as much as I do. It was from a place of care, and I valued it. And it was incredibly helpful to me. You need to know if you're getting criticism from someone who cares, and you need to value that. Then John says, constructive criticism, we need to learn from it. We need to learn from someone that is helping us on how to learn and improve. But again, I go back to what I'm saying. The way you can handle criticism well is being comfortable in your own skin. You can't assess someone else's motive of being caring or being passionate about your improvement if you come from an unstable, insecure, self-doubting place. You can't. Because you see the world as you are, not as the way they are.
That's true.
And so you don't even know how to assess somebody's motive on criticism if you're not settled within yourself. But when you get settled, now you can look at someone that cares for you and say, I know you're giving me that because you care for me. I know you're giving that to me because you want to learn from me. But then we go to the dark side of criticism. And this is right in John's notes. You need to download the bonus resource if you haven't, because there's meat in those notes. We go to the dark side of criticism, which is casual criticism and cruel criticism. Casual criticism is often uncaring and unfounded. They just want to criticize something. It's what's happening in social media right now. Post something that somebody else don't like, and they're going to casually, hiding behind their keyboard, they're going to casually give you why you're wrong, why they disagree. They don't care about you. They're not trying to make you better. They're just trying to find a fight to pick. It's casual. John says you got to learn how to ignore that. Don't even give it a moment. I can remember when there were political issues that people wanted John to make a comment on. And John said, I'm not making a comment on that. My life has made a comment on that issue. I'm not getting there. And I mean, all of our team wanted John to raise a flag. In fact, they said, silence is agreement. And I told John what people said, man, John, you need to make a statement about this. And John said, I'm not making a statement about that. He ignored the critique that sounded like it was someone who cares. It felt like it was someone trying to improve us. And John said, no, I know what the motive behind that is. And I've already made a statement on that with my life. You don't need a 140 character statement from me. And then finally, there's the people with cruel criticism. They are literally trying to hurt and be unfair.
Right.
And John says, reject that. Don't even give it a time of day. I reject that criticism because of your motive. So again, Tracy, I could spend a lot more time on this, but I really want to challenge you on this one. This was probably my favorite takeaway question in this, and that is when you can get secure, then criticism can be your best friend. But if you're not secure, you're constantly trying to deflect it, you're constantly trying to justify it, you're constantly trying to have an argument about it, and it's just not going to be helpful. It comes from a place of security. It comes from a place of self-confidence.
I think you just hit the nail on the head, Mark, and that could even be our bonus question number 13. All of these could be summarized in that question, and that's the piece that John starts with in everything and why he is so good in all of these areas because of the question that you just reminded us of, and I wrote it down here in my notes. Are you settled or secure in who you are? Because from that, all of these 12 questions for the last 2 weeks that we've been talking about helps you to hear all of these things, hear criticism and discern the right criticism, and whether you're optimistic or whether you can be creative or handle critique and have staying power and all the things we've talked about. It really all comes down to, are you settled and secure in who you are that you can handle that? So I love that you landed on that first and spent so much time there, because it is really the difference maker, that question right there. And it's the place where John starts with, and it's the place that makes you, why he chose you to be his second chair, why he has passed the baton to you, is passing the baton to you, because you are a leader who is settled in who you are. And that is a lesson to all of us who are listening to this podcast. We can be legs to this legacy. We can pick up our own batons and carry that into our circle of influence when we become settled and secure in who we are. We have just a couple minutes left. I want you to just address this one, Mark, because that last question, number 12, is because we addressed, are you optimistic, number 11 already before. Are you decisive? What about our friends? We have found with many, many leaders, they have a big, big passion in their heart. They have a big vision. They have big dreams and big ideas, and they have staying power if they could just get started. It's the stop. John quotes Don Shula so often. It's the start that stops most people. We've said it oftentimes on the podcast. It is the start that stops most people. What about our friends who are frozen in fear in those decision-making moments? What do you have to say to encourage them to get out of that frozen space?
I wish it was something profound. I wish it was something that John didn't already say, but it really is that simple. You have to make a decision. You have to move. You have to activate. I've been paralyzed before. Thanks for the kind words that you just said about me just now. But just in the last 4 or 5 months, I was paralyzed out of a fear, out of a violation of what we were just talking about, of some criticism, but it was self-criticism. It wasn't even external, it was internal. And oftentimes when we don't make decisions, we blame it on, well, I'm a processor. Well, I'm slow. I get it right. I start slow, but I finish fast. All of those are really excuses and mischaracterizations that we're frozen in fear, that we're really not challenging ourselves to show up, and that we have what it takes. And that real question on whether we have what it takes is only answered in this question right here. Are you moving? Are you headed somewhere? Are you stuck? Then I don't know if you have what it takes. You're not demonstrating anything. Are you smart? I don't know if you're not smart. If you're not doing anything, I think you think a lot, but I don't know if you're smart. Are you failing and learning from your failure? I don't know. Are you moving? Everything begins to reveal itself when movement happens. John talks a lot now, because of all the work we're doing in our nonprofits, about movements, about mass movements don't begin with the masses, it begins with a few. Well, mass movements don't begin until there's movement, until there is momentum. And you can't answer the question on whether you have what it takes, which, Tracy, we've been talking about this now for 2 weeks. You cannot answer the question unless you move on question number 12. I love that John ended with where you need to start, which is movement. Get moving. It's the question, and I'll wrap with this, Tracy, but it's the question that John's answering in this book that I'm holding up right now. It's called No Limits, Blow the Cap Off Your Capacity. What we're talking about in this book is, in one of the chapters is about emotional capacity. We talked about criticism and critique. I've seen too many people that didn't have capacity and think they need to wait to get capacity before they get moving. The only way you get capacity is by moving and stretching it and moving and flexing, and that's where your capacity is up leveled. Hey, by the way, we'll put it in the show notes. You can have 15% off that book. Use the promotion code podcast. I want to close today 2 weeks. We've been talking about 2 weeks, asking the question, do you have what it takes? And I want to, first of all, for those of you that are watching watching this on YouTube, I want to first look at you in the eye as deep as I can from wherever you're tuning in from today. And I want to tell you, I believe in you. That's why we do this podcast. We believe you do have what it takes, and we keep bringing you message after message, week after week, 315 episodes or more now. We are continuing to invest in you because we believe in you. We think you do have what it takes. We think we're giving you the tools. I love what Vic said from the podcast, How to Improve Every Day. Vic, listen to this podcast. By the way, we'll put in the show notes the link to that podcast. But he said some kind words about me that, Vic, it sounds like you're my brother, so I'm not even going to read the words about me. He said, but I've listened to many of the Maxwell podcasts, and I am always able to take something away that makes me better. He said, thank you so much, Maxwell Leadership Podcast, all of you that's making it happen. And Vic, let me just say this. Thank you for the kind words. You and I know what you said. That's enough. You said kind things about the podcast, but let me tell you this right here. The fact that every podcast you're taking away something that makes you better is not us. And I think we do have a pretty good podcast. It's not Tracy, and I think she's a brilliant leader. What makes that work is because you show up determined that you have what it takes, and you're going to make sure you take this and you're going to expand your capacity. You're going to show that you don't have limit. Vic, you are the poster child of what we've been talking about the last 2 weeks. You do have what it takes. You show up every week to expand what you have so you can do even more. That's what we're all about. We want to bring powerful, positive change to the world because everyone deserves to be led well.